Sophia. It's exciting to be here at Voice Talks today. And for this segment, we're going to be chatting with people who support voice development. And we'll be doing some introductions of these folks and the companies. And then we're going to jump into questions to see about what they think is the future of voice. And so let's go start off with Jan from Jovo. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm Jan. I'm one of the founders of Jovo. Jovo is the most popular open source framework that lets developers build apps that work across voice assistants like Google Assistant, Alexa, or even the web. So our goal is to add a voice layer to any type of product or service. And I can show you a demo if you want.
Jovo is an open source development framework, which means it's fully customizable, free of charge, and can be hosted on your own servers. And it offers many integrations to platforms like Google Assistant, Alexa, Bixby, and so on. Here's a sample project that integrates with Google Assistant and offers a simple interaction that asks a user for their name. And one of our most popular features is local development. So you can run the Jovo development server right on your computer and then open the Jovo debugger to send test requests right to your computer to test the flow. And this is just one of the features how we make the overall development experience easier. And one product that we just announced is Jovo Inbox that helps you to learn from existing user behavior and QA tests.
Wow, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Jan. Okay, so now let's go over with Braden from VoiceFlow. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jessica. So I'm Braden Reams, CEO of VoiceFlow. We're a visual way to design, prototype, and build conversational apps without coding. Actually, yeah, do you want to see a demo?
That'd be great, please.
Okay, so here we are on the VoiceFlow canvas. I can actually go ahead and start to build out our conversation. And so as I do this, I'll say that VoiceFlow is a easy drag and drop way to design, prototype, and build conversational experiences. So I'm going to go ahead and say, welcome to Voice Talks. I can select my voice. Let's try the standard A. Great, that's a little Aussie accent. I can pull in something like, how can I help? And I help. And then from there, we're going to have the user make a choice. And in this case, we're going to have them, we're going to tell them a joke. So we're going to say joke. If the user says that, pull them over here. You can see how fast I'm just pulling together this conversation. We'll say this is funny. And now we can actually go ahead and test this in the browser.
Welcome to Voice Talks. How can I help?
Joke.
This is funny.
And there we go. We actually tested our conversation in the browser, and I can actually go ahead and upload this directly to the Google Assistant console, where we can then test it on device or in browser. And we can actually get the real code. VoiceFlow does generate the full code base, so you can actually export this full production app code from VoiceFlow. And that's it. Super easy way to design, prototype, and build Google Actions.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Braden. That was really cool. I think something that's really fantastic is the abstraction to make it easier for people to be able to build voice applications, because this is such a new territory. But I want to start off with asking the question, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to voice development, especially for people who are new to this space?
The biggest challenge that we see right now, or have been seeing the last few years, was lack of focus, or like trying to solve everything. The problem is that natural language is so open, you can basically do anything with it, that people are trying to solve any problem with it, trying to build these really, really great general assistants that can do anything, small talk, ask for the weather and book meetings and so on. And we learned the last few years that it's helpful at the beginning to really focus on one thing, to build like these single purpose voice apps that solve a specific use case. And then go from there, and then expand it over time.
Yeah, that's so true. It reminds me of like the internet in the early days when people were like, I'm going to build all the things. And really, we don't need websites that do all the things. You know, having a website to be dedicated to that one specific task and doing it really well creates a lot of value. Definitely.
You know, when we started initially, before we were building VoiceFlow, which is, of course, the tool on the platform, we were just sort of an indie voice app developer ourselves. And we found the toughest part was sort of getting our cognitive model all set up, or how we think about conversational apps versus traditional mediums like, let's take web or mobile. So, understanding even just, what intents are, how utterances work, how dialogue management works, repair paths, happy paths. There's just a lot of lingo that comes into it. And you really have to, take sort of that first month to not only tinker around and start to understand the technology, but how all the technology plays together, the NLP, NLU layer, the dialogue management, entity slots. There's just a lot of stuff you have to learn that's completely different from other methods of development like web or mobile.
Yeah, it's a lot of jargon, which is interesting because it's all voice and we all know how to talk, but it's the understanding how do you pull those pieces apart and label them, and then how do you reconstruct it all back together. That is challenging, definitely.
It's a little embarrassing to say, but it took me a few weeks to actually understand like what an intent was. Describing an intent is like, okay, so it's basically a function handler, like you would have in web or mobile, but it's all derived from what the user's intention is. You're like, what? Like, how's that work? And then you have to also understand the NLP, NLU layer to actually understand, oh, okay, like that's how the intention is being derived. It's being derived from the NLU, like got it. So there's a few interlocking components, because if it's just an intent on your own, you're like, how's it doing that? Right? Like, normally the function, like it gets called, but like I press a button, but like now it's just like the user's feelings. It's a very different model of thinking for sure.
Brilliant. I'm so happy that you said that, because I definitely, one of the first things, and I like to advocate, especially to developers, was my first voice application. I got so confused and stuck, and it wasn't the technology. It was the fact that I didn't know how to move a conversation forward and how to link these intents and how they could kind of interweave. So definitely that conversation model and understanding that part, that's really different from having a GUI, having like a screen where a user can only push one or two buttons and that's it. So I feel you. I'm happy you brought that up. Great. Okay. So my second question is, both of you have had tons of expertise and experience working with different companies and agencies and building voice applications. And so in an ideal world, and hopefully this is going to be the future kind of norm, what type of roles and expertise do you think should be on a team when it comes to building for voice applications?
I think we're seeing an evolution of sort of the team that's putting together these conversational agents. And, there's a few different trends that we're seeing. So one is the consolidation of several different digital channels into sort of one central conversational AI team. So an example might be, you could have a company which has a call center with their IVR systems, and they have a conversation design team working there. And then they have a Google Action, and they have a conversation design team working there. And they may also have a web chat platform for customer support, and they have a conversation design team working there. And so a lot of modern enterprises are going, I've got three separate teams. They're not sharing components. They're not sort of sharing knowledge. And, they're not really creating a center of excellence within the company like what we have with web and mobile. And so you are starting to see a consolidation of these channels to building, a central conversational AI team that's going to manage really, multiple different channels, including your voice channels like Google Actions and Alexa skills. Within that team, you're starting to see further segmentation of like what the design role is. So before it used to be like you have one designer who does everything. More and more, it's, you have a copywriter who's focusing on just the prompts and the responses. They're working with legal and marketing to make sure that everything's on brand, on persona. You've got a conversation designer who's really acting as like the flow architect. What's the flow of the conversation? How do we want this to actually proceed? What are the objectives? And then you'll often have a conversational PM who's knows all the different layers of the stack, like the NLP, NLU. They know sort of what the flow is. They also know sort of what the baseline responses need to be, and so they're able to kind of mesh it all together and work with the developers to actually create these tickets. So we're really starting to see a more robust team structure be created, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I liked what Braden said about the conversational PMs knowing all layers of the stack, because I think this is super important. Early on, when the platforms were so new, they still are, but early on, you've always seen like someone doing the design and then handing it off to a developer, and then after weeks or maybe months of work, they found out that it's not possible right now to build something like this with the current platforms like Google Assistant, because everything is so new. So it's super important to know like what is possible, what is technically possible, because we're so limited. There's so many moving pieces, and this is why I've been thinking more and more of, especially early on, of like a hybrid role of a creative technologist, someone that has some creative capabilities, knows how to design a good conversational path, but then also knows the technologies and knows what goes on, like maybe below the surface, what's happening on the NLU layer, dialogue management, and so on. So I think, yeah, at the beginning, it's super important for designers, developers, and so on, product managers to really work together and build something as a cross-functional team.
And to add on to that, we're seeing some of the most forward-thinking enterprises now start to take essentially a layered approach where the designers are designing with the restrictions that they have today, knowing that in, let's say 2 years from now, the NLP, NLU may have advanced. Maybe we move from a rules-based dialogue manager to a machine learning-based dialogue manager. So there's lots of different sort of restrictions that over time are going to get lifted as the technology improves. And so we're actually starting to now see designs where it's, here's the design for today, and then in the design, you'll actually have a conditional saying like, when this is possible, this is the way we should be architecting this. So, that way the developers know, where do we need to build a foundation so that we're not just building for today, but we're also leaving the door open for tomorrow.
I love it. Yeah, there's, I think, something with this space where you definitely need to have a little bit more proactive kind of communication and understanding, because we can't depend on, what we've always done, because we don't have that history compared to other technologies. And I love what, Brandon, what you were mentioning of just kind of future-proofing, or at least thinking of ways, because again, this is such a new space, just to be able to put a little note, hey, this could be an option. I think it is great, and actually is a fantastic segue to my last question that I have, which is, what do you see next for voice when it comes to technology, to the market space? Kind of where do you think voice development or how users are going to be experiencing voice will be different in 5 years from now?
I think to understand the future of voice, you kind of have to understand, what is voice as an interface. And ultimately, voice is a fantastic input interface, but it's not a very good output interface. And so the example I give to really demonstrate this is, imagine you were picking a Netflix movie one night. If you know exactly, the genre and the movie you wanted, it is way faster and easier to go ahead and speak your choice. And I'm sure we've all wished we could have done that. Rather than have to sort of, move around on the keyboard using our remote. It's a really frustrating user experience. However, if you flip it and you don't know what you want, and instead, Netflix was going to give you 10 suggestions, reading out 10 different movies is going to give the user cognitive overload. They have to remember, what was that title? What was it about again? And, we're just going to get way too much information, because ultimately voice is a really slow output interface. And so when you think about what the future of voice is, given the restrictions and sort of the pros and cons of the interface, it really points towards, more multimodal interfaces where voice is one of the possible modalities, and it's often going to be the first modality, voice first, in an interaction, but it's not always going to be both sides. And so, I think we're going to see more interactions where, for example, if you have a mobile app, let's take like Uber, for example. I should be able to, if I'm in a public place and I don't want to use my voice, I should be able to just use touch. If my phone's on the other side of the room, I should be able to order an Uber with just my voice. Or because it is faster to speak than type, I should be able to, put the directions in, order the Uber, and then get the visual confirmations and do the payment and things through the visual touchscreen. So really seeing these mixing of modalities to always create what is the best possible user experience given the current platform and context. And actually, Jan's written a ton on this subject in terms of sort of context-driven development. So I think it's a good segue to pass it over.
Yeah, thank you. It's my favorite topic, multimodal experiences. Also, Braden mentioned the term context and voice first. We've been thinking more and more, voice is a very important interface, but we've been thinking more and more of the term voice first. Maybe primes people a little too much, thinking about, okay, I have to make this work on voice only, or think about voice only. And this is why we usually call this a context first. We say this means something like delivering the right information at the right time on the right device. So whichever device someone is interacting with, we want to deliver the best potential experience for them.
That's fantastic. I love that term, context first, because it reminds me of like meeting people where they're at instead of trying to force people to like fit into how we build things. It's really being of service and being the best experience for our users, which is fantastic. Oh my gosh, I'm sure we could spend hours and hours chatting about all of these great things. Unfortunately, we have a time limit, but I want to thank both of you so much for joining me and answering my questions and spending all this time with us. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Jessica.
Thank you so much for